Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, when you have an endo or any doctor with whom you just can't see eye to eye, what are your options? And should you always disclose diabetes at work or school? An interesting conversation.
You know, honesty is the best policy. It really is, especially with your health. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest with your doctor.
John Chaffier has lived with type 1 for more than 40 years. He has a lot of strong opinions and some hair-raising experiences to share. Plus, a little more on Dexcom's G6 announcement. And in our Know Better segment, a boost for Bigfoot. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Glad to have you along. Maybe this is your spring break. Maybe it just ended like ours did. Regardless, hope you had a wonderful Easter, Passover, or just a couple of days off, perhaps. Yeah, if this show sounds just a little bit different, it's because I'm actually recording this while we're on spring break. I'm at my mom's house in Florida. My schedule got a little out of whack with, being on vacation. And then we put out that bonus episode last week when Dexcom announced it had FDA approval for the G6. Got to get that breaking news in for you. So, it's all back to normal soon. And this episode is a great interview. I'm excited to bring you one of those ordinary people I talk about a lot. You don't have to be famous with diabetes or a big healthcare company to make a difference. And that's what this conversation this week is all about. And as always, we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. If you're really just finding us because of that Dexcom bonus episode, which, man, it was downloaded by the thousands, welcome. Glad to have you along. My story is my son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes just before he turned 2. That was 11 years ago. My husband has type 2 diabetes, and I have a background in broadcasting. I was a professional local radio and TV anchor, host, reporter, that kind of thing for my professional career. And that's how you get the podcast. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. One Touch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News and World Report named One Touch as a #1 pharmacist recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about One Touch brand products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Touch logo. I met this week's guest at a JDRF walk kickoff in Charlotte, where we live, a few weeks back. And this show isn't always about breaking news or talking to celebrities. Sometimes we learn just as much, if not more, from regular people, let's call it, living with type 1. John Chaffier was diagnosed at age 10 back in the 1970s when things were a little different for managing diabetes. And we had a really interesting conversation when we first met about when it's time to fire your doctor. And that's actually something I've done. But we covered a lot of other topics as well. And I think you'll glean some really great information here. John, thanks so much for joining me. It was fun to just kind of meet you on the fly at that local JDRF event. And then, sometimes you talk to people and you realize you want to learn more. So I appreciate you taking the time to share more of your story.
Sure. I mean, that's what it is about, sharing information and learning from other people's experiences.
Let's just start out with the basics. Tell me when you were diagnosed, how old you were, all that sort of stuff.
So I was diagnosed in 1975. I was 10 years old. It was right between Christmas and New Year's. My grandfather had a business, and we had a Christmas party every year. And a lot of people had said, boy, John doesn't look really healthy. And sure enough, my uncle, who was a doctor, he took me to his office between that week and did the right test. And he said, he's got to go to the hospital. And I remember that to this day. I still remember that day going into the hospital.
Do you remember how long you stayed? Because it was a different time back then where they actually let you stay a little bit and learn.
Yeah, I was there, I think, a week. But I was giving myself injections within 2 days. I mean, by the time everybody had really come to visit me, I was already on the pattern of, okay, this is what I need to do. And I got some really good groundwork right away and just, took it from there.
You know, when we're talking about the 70s, just for perspective, I'm trying to think what that meant. Did you have a home glucose meter at the time? I mean, obviously you weren't checking your blood sugar with finger pricks, I think, right?
No. This is before you even had test strips. You were still using tablets back then to test urine sugar, actually, not even blood sugars. And I was taking injections with needles that are nowhere near the thinness of the gauges of needles they have today.
In terms of timeline, so are you still boiling needles and reusing at that time, or do you at least have disposable syringes?
No, I was past that. We did have disposable syringes, so we did have that benefit. And it wasn't too long afterwards when they started making test strips available, which made it a little easier to do your checking.
But when you say test strips, you still mean for urine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that it wasn't that long ago that you had to do all this.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, I've seen some major progress in technology and treatment for diabetes over the years. And where we're at today and where I came from, I can understand why it was difficult to control the condition that long ago, because you were really kind of doing some advanced planning. I mean, even if you look at injection therapy, you take a whole lot of medication and it sits in your body. And then you spend the rest of the day trying to figure out, is my mood going to take my absorptions different? Is something going to come up? Am I going to eat too much? You know, it was constantly trying to understand, what did I do and what am I doing, and adapting accordingly to it. And when you don't have a pump where you can just say, look, I just need like another unit of insulin, you were taking an injection and you hope you got it right. So it was definitely a dynamic time to control diabetes.
What was the biggest change for you as you look back? Was it getting a meter that you could carry with you? Was it going on a pump? Any idea really what you looked at something and said, wow, that's a big change?
It had to have been the pump. I mean, I was on, right before I went on the pump, I was doing, I think, like 8 injections a day. I was using short-acting insulins, and I was really trying to micromanage the condition. And I was running so tight, I ended up in the hospital a lot of times because I was just running so tight on my schedule. And when I went on the pump, it really made a big difference. I was able to maintain the type of control I want without compromising my ability to just live.
It must be so different I'm sure you don't think about it every day, but to think about, like you said, when you're 10 years old, starting out with the older insulins where you had to really plan and eat to what the shots you were taking, to now to having so much more flexibility. Do you feel like, and this may be a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, do you feel like your health is better for that?
I think the ability to maintain my health is much better. I generally ran pretty good sugars even back then. But, I've had the condition, I'm going on 43 years this December, and I've got no complications, so I must have been doing something right. But the ability now it's not just saying, am I not having complications? Now it's like, can I keep that 6 for my A1Cs? And I've been able to maintain that. I think my last A1C was a 6.2. So now your goals are a little more immediate. You're not looking at, am I just healthy? But now you're saying, am I really at the point where my diabetes is not in control of anything I want to do? And I've never let it be that way. And so I am able to do things, go out, exercise, ride a motorcycle, do things that probably wouldn't even have been considered, back a long time ago from today.
That's a great point. I asked about the health because I've heard a lot of people who are diagnosed before the faster acting insulins who, I don't want to say it this way, but I will, I'm not sure there's any other way to say it, who seem to have had to have more discipline, right? You just couldn't do certain things. You couldn't eat certain things at certain times. It just was a more disciplined lifestyle. And so that's kind of why I asked that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I think it really comes down to education. A lot of people, they'll see me eat like a piece of cake. They're like, you can't have that. Like, no, it's okay for me to have this, but I don't eat it all the time. It's an occasion, so I'll have something now. It's not a part of my everyday life. And that's what people tend to misunderstand about diabetes. You can do things, but it's all about moderation. It's all about controlling not just the medication, but your lifestyle in general. And if you can adapt your lifestyle to that, it's not too hard to control. The way I explain it to people is, look, I have to watch what I eat, I have to exercise, and I have to watch my meds. 2 of those 3 things a non-diabetic should be doing anyway. So really, what do I have to do? And it kind of puts it into perspective.
That's a great point. So you're 10 years old. You go back to your life, the life of a 10-year-old. What were your teenage years like? Because we want to talk about transitioning. I know this is something that you and I had talked about before, going from pediatrics to adults, going to a job, being on your own. But what was it like becoming a teenager with type 1?
It's confusing, like much else at that point in your life. I mean, your body's changing, so you're constantly trying to figure out, what do I need to do today? Am I giving myself my right medications, or my sugar's okay? And your body can throw curveballs at you at any one moment. And then there's also the emotional stuff you have to go through. Why you start asking a lot more of the why questions. Why me? Why does this happen? Why do I have to do this? What am I doing? And like everything else at that point in your life, you'll eventually get through it. It's just not fun going through it. Of all the things that happen in your life, your diabetes, regardless of anything else, is one thing that you can absolutely control. So if you really need to find something to stabilize yourself, make that your point. Because you can control your meds. You can control how you, eat. You can control your blood sugars. And if you get that little bit of a foundation, it allows you to kind of work your way through the rest. One less thing to worry about, so to speak.
Right back to John in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And one of the best features of the Dexcom G5 mobile are the customizable alerts and alarms. Customizable threshold alerts provide advance warning of hypo and hyperglycemic events before they happen. Alerts help Benny, my son, when he's distracted during times like playing or being a teenager. So we have found it incredibly helpful to troubleshoot high blood sugars before they get too high and to catch lows before they get too low. It's peace of mind, and I cannot imagine, especially overnight, using a continuous glucose monitoring system without alarms. It just wouldn't work for us. Find out more about the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to my talk with John Chaffier. So then let's talk about that transition to college, to being an adult. What stands out to you? Because I'd love for our listeners to kind of learn from your experience, if you don't mind. What are some things to look out for?
So when I went to college, one thing, a lot of people who are diabetic at that point in their life, they don't want a lot of people to know. But really, that's kind of not the thing you want to do. And something happened to me when I went to college. I had my dorm mate. I told him I was diabetic. A couple of guys I know told him I was diabetic. But that's the extent of what I told them. I didn't tell them, anything about my medications or anything really about the condition. And a really bad thing happened to me. I had a hypoglycemic episode, and I was passed out in my bed. I wasn't seizing yet. I was just there. And one of my friends came in to wake me up for class, and he said, well, I wasn't responding. He didn't know what he was doing. He basically took one of my syringes, filled it with insulin, and stuck it into the vein in my hand.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I ended up having a grand mal seizure. I ended up in a coma, I think, for 3 days it was, till my body recovered. I came out of it fine, but he felt so bad, and he didn't understand. I learned a really big lesson that day, which is just telling people you're diabetic is not sufficient. You have to let people know about the condition. And not a deep understanding, but listen, I take this medication. If you see me acting a certain way, then tell me to eat something. Tell me to question something. If I'm not responding, call an ambulance. It's just basic knowledge. When you're a child, your parents kind of learn this. When you're on your own, you don't think about that. You don't have enough experience in life to say, hey, I need to let you understand what this is and what you need to know to help me if I can't help myself. So here's glucose drinks if my sugars are low. If I don't respond, if I answer this way, if I answer that way. And that's kind of like the same kind of transition happens later on in life, like when I go to work now. When I work with people, I tell them, listen, I'm diabetic. I want you to know I keep in this drawer, I keep glucose in here. If you talk to me and I start answering in one-word answers, or I look like I'm not quite there, tell me to have something to drink. If I tell you no, tell me to have something to drink, because that means I'm not quite there. My body is still upright, but my brain is long gone. And that's what you need to let people know is how to treat you properly. I got lucky.
Yeah. Wow. Let me just play devil's advocate because a lot of people are more private, and especially at work, they might feel, I don't want people to be watching me like I'm a ticking time bomb. I don't want special attention. I can take care of this myself. Do you really feel that strongly about it? Do you feel like there's a way to do that and people at work aren't looking at you like, oh, this guy, can't give him the big project?
There are two parts to that. Is one, you have to maintain your health. So you can't be constantly, falling down at work or having issues. Then it becomes kind of more public. Okay, the other thing is that if people don't understand, they may misinterpret what happens. Another great example is I was at a meeting that ran through lunch, and I knew my sugars were getting low. And because I was at work and I was concentrating on the meeting, I kind of kept pushing it back. And at one point, my diabetes kind of took over, and I got a little aggressive in responding to somebody. And afterwards, my manager came up and he said, John, you can't talk to people like that. I said, listen, it wasn't intentional. And when I talked to that person, I apologized for what happened. But because I kind of ignored my diabetes, I ended up creating a situation that could have been misinterpreted. And it all worked out in the end. But those are the kind of things that you have to let people know. If they're going to hold a meeting, and I do this now, if they hold a meeting and it goes through lunch, I got to say, listen, I have to wrap this up in 5 minutes. I need to go eat. I will come back after I eat if we're still going on, but I need to take care of myself right now. And that's the nature of the beast. You can't avoid that. You can't get around that. And so you do what is appropriate for the environment.
Well, you seem like a pretty confident guy. Were you always like that, or did that come out of those experiences?
I think part of that is from the experiences. You don't want to have repetition with the bad experiences that you can have with diabetes. And so you kind of say, okay, what do I need to learn? How do I need to react? What do I need to know? Because those situations, if you're taking care of yourself, don't happen often. But when they do, people need to be aware. Just like your parents, when I was 10 years old, my parents had to learn what it was. They had to learn what it meant, and there was no getting around it. That continues with you throughout life. So take your condition, understand it, and work with it. Work with it, not against it.
So when you and I met at this JDRF kickoff in Charlotte, we were immediately talking about, I don't know if it's funny, it made me laugh, bad experiences with doctors, and how people may not realize that they can fire their doctor. So let's talk about that. What brought you, and I can tell my story, I guess, but what brought you to the point where you said, this guy or this girl is not for me, I need a new doctor?
It was really interesting because the physician himself was a great guy. He really took care of my diabetes. He gave me good advice. He was a good physician, but his office was run very poorly. I used to drive an hour to get to that office from where I was working at the time in Pennsylvania. And I would get to the office, and then there would be a 1 hour, 2 hour, 2.5 hour delay till I even saw the doctor. I'm getting off work to come see you, so I don't have time to wait another 2 hours, especially because I may be coming to you at 4 o'clock and now it's 6 o'clock. Now I got to eat. You're a diabetologist. You should understand this better than anybody. And I told him, I said, listen, doc, and I don't want to name his name because he's still a good, like I said, he's a good doctor. But basically, doc, listen, I can't continue to do this. This is not very well organized. I said, this is not a thing against you. And I gave a couple more visits to try and see if, maybe telling him would prompt something. And what it came down to is that I would call the office and they would say, oh, no, we're on a 2-hour delay. Can you come in 2 hours later? Well, now, so you haven't really solved it. You just told me to come later. And when I would get there, sometimes I'd still wait 45 minutes to an hour. So I eventually said, look, I need to find another physician. The next physician I went to, his office was run very professionally. He would see you at the time of your appointment. If I had an appointment at 11:30, he was there, and I saw him at 11:30. And that was consistent every single time. He didn't lack for any care for me. He was an excellent doctor. He answered all my questions. He took care of everything. But he respected me as a patient. He respected my time as a professional. And that's a part of it. Your doctor is your best asset for making sure that your health is in the right direction and for asking questions. But he's basically your employee still. You choose him. He doesn't choose you. And so you have to keep that in mind. If you're not getting the kind of quality of care you want, even if it's not the care itself, but the care environment, that's important.
I think it's hard for many people who have limited choices. You know, in our area, we do have several endocrinologists and a few different practices, which is unusual as well. Any recommendations for people who feel like they might be stuck?
That's kind of a hard situation, and it's not one you can, you can't do anything about it. You would have to say, is it worth maybe driving a little further to get maybe some better, physician ability or choice? If not, then it's time to sit down and have a talk with your doctor. Say, listen, this is not working out, and this is why. If it continues that way, you're going to have to make a decision. Am I getting at least the medical care I need to be able to say this is worth the baggage that comes with it? That's a personal decision. That's one that you have to make. But if you're aware of it, you may be able to, just like I initially did, say, okay, well, let's see if I can work around this. Can I still, call the office and come in later? In the end, my decision was, no, this is not working out well for me. I'm going to, choose somewhere else. But if you don't have many options, then do the best you can. But remember, your health is your primary goal. So just like some of the other things I talked about, you have to decide, where do I pick up the ball and take care of myself?
That's a great point.
And then you go from there.
Yeah. There's also more options online, especially with diabetes. There are some, endocrinologists and certified diabetes educators who will consult with you online. And a lot of hospitals and doctors' offices now have care portals where once you've seen them, you can often just message them through the care portal, and a lot of health business can be taken care of that way. So especially if you like the physician, like your situation, John, but the staff was so difficult, and that can definitely happen. I'd recommend next time you have direct access to the doctor, or call them and ask them to call you back, find out if there's a way to communicate online. If their hospitals, some of the bigger hospitals, especially with big rural areas, now have a lot of telemedicine. I think they're still calling it telemedicine. I don't know what you'd call it, but where you can Skype, right, with the doctor. So there are some alternatives that they may not advertise. My endocrinologist lets me email with him. I think part of that is because I've known him for so long. And because I was a health reporter here in town, so I have a lot of doctor emails that, I'll be honest with you, I don't know that everybody gets. But I do know that he communicates with a lot of patients through email and care portal. And it helps because you need to see your physician face to face, but you don't always need to go every 3 months. And sometimes a lot of that can be done remotely, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly there are more options. I mean, at the time, when I was going, email wasn't even an option. It was just starting, it was just,
right.
The internet was just
hard
being
to remember.
birthed at that point, so you didn't have that. And certainly there are more options in terms of telecommuting to your doctor, as it may be. So yes, take advantage of what you can and how you can communicate. I think you're going to run into more scenarios like that nowadays with older physicians. Maybe a younger physician, he's got email, he's got all these, technological capabilities. But an older physician, kind of, a local doctor may not have that capability, and again, it's a balancing act of taking care of yourself, and finding out what works.
I think too, and I haven't known you that long, but I think we're similar in personality in that we are not afraid to politely and respectfully be blunt with people. And, that's one of those things where I run to, I don't want to make them mad at me, or I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be that patient. Is that your experience, that you've just been upfront with people?
Honesty is the best policy. It really is, especially with your health. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to be honest with your doctor. If you go to your doctor and say, no, I didn't eat any candy, and your sugars, are coming in at 8.5, A1C, somebody's not quite telling the right story. It's the same thing here, is that you've got to be upfront. Give them the option to say, this is why I'm dissatisfied. Communicate with them. They may not realize it. He's busy. He may be so, into other things going on with his practice, he may not even realize it. And if people don't speak up, he won't know. Give them the opportunity. They're no less human than we are. They just have a lot more education.
Yeah, good point. John, what do you do, if you don't mind me asking? What's your job?
I'm a software developer. I write code.
Have you tried any of the open APS or the do-it-yourself pancreas type stuff?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm kind of sitting on when I want to make the next transition, whether I want to go to a closed system or maybe wait a little bit longer. I happen to use the Omnipod system. I kind of like the tubeless system. Kind of fits my lifestyle a little bit more. But I see the advantages of some of these closed systems being able to make refinements to what I do. And so it is an interesting prospect. I think we're on the cusp of some major changes again in the technology to help minimize the impact of this condition on the body overall. And so it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
As you look back on 40 plus years with type 1, if you could go back to your 10-year-old self, anything you'd say, any fear you'd say, look, it's going to be okay?
I think it would just say, you're going to do okay. Like I said, I got a lot of good education, I got a good start, and I just maintained it. So, knowing that you're not going to, at the time when I was diagnosed, people were still losing limbs because of diabetes. They were going blind because of it. There were a lot of bad complications, and so that's why, to me, complications were the big kind of goal. Don't get yourself to the point where you're going to have that happen. Now I'm older, I can control myself better. Now it's like, hey, keep going so you can retire. Keep going so you can see your daughter get married. The important things in life now have changed, but the goal is still the same, is maintain your health and be able to do whatever you want.
Well, John, thank you so much for talking to me today and sharing your story. It was great to meet you, and I knew it would be a fun conversation. Thanks for coming on the show.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
I'll link up a little bit more information about, firing your doctor. That's not really how everybody puts it, but it can be very difficult. I mean, as we mentioned, sometimes you do not have options, but in your town, in your geographical area. But there are a lot of online options, and I'll link that up. There are a few services that are, real certified diabetes educators, registered nurses, that sort of thing. And they understand that the need is out there. So I will link that up in the show notes or at diabetes-connections.com, and you can find out more information from there. Couple of quick things on the Dexcom G6. We did a bonus episode when this was announced last week, and I highly recommend you go back and listen to that. It's about half an hour with Dexcom's CEO, Kevin Sayer, and we cover really kind of in rapid fire fashion the top spots of that. A couple of things that I did not touch on and have since learned, that the touchscreen receiver that Dexcom unveiled last year, you actually do not have to use that. The FDA is still requiring that a receiver go out with every G6 system, whether you use it or not. But if you're a G5 user right now, you need a free software update to function with the new G6. So if you have the touchscreen receiver and you have a G5, you can update it to the new G6. If, like me, you have the old G5 receiver, it does not say here whether that will accept the software update. I doubt it, since it's not explicitly stated. But you can get the new touchscreen receiver. That's a question that I don't think has been answered 100%, and I guess we'll find out either right before it starts shipping, probably in June, or hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The other issue was the question of whether G6 would be directly to smartwatch. The answer also appears to be no. At this point, you still need to go sensor to phone to watch. But from everything I've read and heard, it looks like that is coming closely behind as well. So a lot more to learn. As always, I will put more information in the show notes, especially as things seem to be changing pretty quickly here. If they change again between recording and airing this episode, I'll definitely indicate that and link up more information in the show notes or at diabetes-connections.com. In our Know Better segment this week, Bigfoot Biomedical gets a big boost from Abbott. Know Better is brought to you by No Foods. No Foods is the leading provider of grain-free food products. They're based in Atlanta, and they are fantastic. Natural, non-GMO, grain, gluten-free, exceedingly low glycemic index alternatives to traditional grain-based foods. I mean, we're talking about waffles and donuts and muffins and croutons, pancake mix. They even have pasta. This is all the stuff that when you're told that you need to go gluten-free for whatever reason, you miss, right? I've been gluten-free since about mid-November, And this really helped me make the transition. I love the cinnamon cookies. We really like the chocolate chip waffles. And if you follow No Foods on Instagram, they will show you all sorts of fun ways to use their product. I'm not the most creative cook, but they will show you the way. It's really fun stuff. And make sure to use the promo code Stacey10, S-T-A-C-E-Y, the number 10, Stacey10, to save on any purchase at No Foods, and learn more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the No Foods logo. Kind of overshadowed in the news about the Dexcom G6 being released last week was news that Abbott, the makers of the Freestyle Libre, among other things, is investing in a big way in Bigfoot Biomedical. Now, you may know, if you're a regular listener to the show or you're in the diabetes online community, Bigfoot, of course, is a startup creating diabetes devices and systems, probably best known for the pump that they're working on, but they are working on a lot of other devices and systems within their diabetes platform. As they say, they will offer everything but the insulin. Bigfoot is developing pens and pumps and monitors and connecting them with smartphone technology. They're trying to figure out how to do this in a different payment method. Maybe there'll be a monthly fee. They're really trying to work with the insurance companies to make this a different kind of model. So Abbott and Bigfoot have already agreed to use the Libre with Bigfoot's insulin delivery systems. I guess I can't just say pump because it's also the pens. But this is different. Abbott is investing an undisclosed amount for this round in Bigfoot Biomedical. In the press release, Jeffrey Brewer, the CEO of Bigfoot, quoted as saying, they want to create easy-to-use devices connected to smartphones, accessible to as many people as possible. And part of the plan includes making it easier for doctors to write and patients to manage prescriptions. I'll link up a lot more you can read for yourself at diabetes-connections.com. Bigfoot is in some clinical trials now, and they are hoping to be on the market in 2020. And now you know better. Hitting the road over the next few weeks for some fun events. I'll be in Orlando in late April for Touched by Type 1, a women's conference all about type 1 diabetes. Excited to go to that. I'll be back in Orlando in July for the annual Friends for Life conference, and we are working on doing the show live, or at least live to tape from the conference. Still working on the technical side of that one. I'll keep you posted. The Lilly conference I was invited to is rescheduled for May, and we have some great events in the Charlotte area with Riding on Insulin teaming up with JDRF, and I will let you know about that because I think they're hoping to take that one to more places. We have the Whitewater Center here in Charlotte, which is a national whitewater center, and they do all sorts of like Olympic trials and huge family events here. I've never been, so I'm excited to go to this JDRF event in a couple of weeks, and I'll keep you posted really on how it goes and whether they're going to be trying to take that to different parts of the country. When last week's episode aired, I got a lot of new people wanting to join the Facebook group. So if you haven't done that yet, please come on over. You know, Facebook's always redoing things, and the easiest way to keep in touch, it seems, is the group rather than the page. So I'd love to have you in there. It's Diabetes Connections, the group. Very easy to find, and we do some fun stuff in there. And let me know what you think. As always, you can contact me over social media or hit me up on email, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. Thanks to my editor, John Buchanan, who is piecing together the show from my crazy recordings done some in Florida, some in North Carolina. He is always doing a fantastic job and does it behind the scenes, so I like to thank him for every episode. And thank you so much for listening as well. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.